Today, we don't come to be comforted. We come to bear witness. Welcome to another episode of Peace Evangelical Lutheran Church's Sermon Podcast. Listen in today for 4 powerful reflections on different parts of the crucifixion story as we observe Good Friday. Thank you for observing this important holy day with us.
3 words, and they all fell to the ground. I am he. An armed detachment, torches, weapons, the full weight of empire showing up in a garden in the middle of the night. And when Jesus speaks, they fall back. The empire falls to its knees. Jesus remains standing, and yet he reaches out his hands to be bound. He lets them take him. That phrase, I am he, isn't an accident. John wants us to catch something. Jesus' disciples, the chief priests, the scribes, the elders, all of them know exactly what's happening when Jesus says, I am he. It echoes back to God talking with Moses at the burning bush when God tells Moses God's name. I am who I am. John wants us to see that voice in the garden is the same voice that spoke to the burning bush. Even as the handcuffs come out, Jesus reveals who he is. He isn't losing power. He's leaning into his purpose. He's steady. He's settled. He's exactly who he says he is. And it's in his settledness where he does a very courageous thing. He protects the disciples. He says, let these men go. Even while being arrested, Jesus is still thinking of others. Grace, God's love freely given, does not run. Grace, again, that's Jesus, doesn't fight. Grace steps forward and says, here I am, and then absorbs what comes next. As you sit here tonight, or wherever it is you're joining us from tonight, ponder these things with me. Where in your life are you reaching for the sword, like Peter? What cup are you refusing to drink? What would it look like to put the sword down, not out of defeat, but out of trust? Peter wasn't a coward. He was the one who drew the sword in the garden. He followed Jesus into the courtyard when everyone else had already run. He got close. He just didn't get close enough to be counted. And so he stood there, warming himself by the fire. While inside, Jesus was being interrogated. And 3 times, when someone looked at him and said, aren't you one of his? Peter said, I am not. The same mouth that said, I am the Messiah, now says, I do not know him. And then the rooster crowed. Here's what I hope we don't miss about that moment. The crow of the rooster isn't punishment. It's the moment that Peter wakes up and sees himself clearly. And the ability to see ourselves honestly, even when it hurts, is a gift. We tend to get weighed down a lot in shame. And we even heap that shame upon ourselves really well. But shame closes things down. That moment opens Peter up, and that's an entirely different thing. Jesus already knew this. John's Jesus is never reactive. He's always intentional. As he sat at the table for dinner, Jesus told Peter this would happen. He didn't say it to predict it or warn about it. He named it so that Peter would know in that moment the rooster crowed that he was still known, still loved, still held. Grace does not require that we be brave first. Grace arrives before the failure, makes room for it, and walks on the other side of it. Remember where Peter is. He's by the fire. The one that the soldiers built as he's warming himself. He's literally standing in the enemy's light, borrowing the enemy's warmth, staying just close enough to watch, but not to claim. There's something very familiar about that distance, that comfortable distance where we can follow Jesus without it costing us anything. What is the fire that you've been warming yourself by? Where have you gotten close enough to feel the warmth, but stayed just far enough to avoid the risk? When would someone look at you and say, were you his? And what did you do with that moment? What is truth? Pilate asked it, and then he walked out the door. He was standing face to face with it. Truth wasn't abstract in that moment. It wasn't an idea or a debate or a question for later. It was a person standing right in front of him, and he still walked away. Not because there wasn't an answer, but because he didn't stay long enough to hear it. And that's where this moment slows down for us, because Pilate actually asks the right question. He names what so many of us are trying to figure out. What is true? What is real? What can be trusted? But notice what happens next. The question is asked, and then the conversation ends. No waiting, no listening, no space for an answer to come. And maybe that's because of what truth looks like here. Because in this moment, truth isn't a concept. It's not something to be proven or debated. It's standing there, quiet, unarmed, refusing to play by the rules of power. A king that doesn't fight to win. A king who doesn't defend himself. That's what Pilate is looking at. And that's where this story turns toward us. It isn't that Pilate asked the wrong question. It's that he asked the right one and still walked away. Because sometimes the truth asks something of us. It costs something. It demands something. It unsettles us. It complicates things. It puts us at odds with the systems that we depend on. And so we ask. And then we move on. But even then, even there, the story doesn't end. Jesus is still standing there. He's not arguing, not begging Pilate to stay. He's just standing in the truth. Because that's what grace looks like here. Grace is steady. It isn't forceful. It remains like truth. Even when it's rejected, waiting, even when we walk away. What is truth? The question is still hanging in the air. The only question is, will we stay long enough to answer? We just said those words together, out loud. Crucify him. Maybe that felt like reading a line, something from a story, something distant. Those just weren't their words. They were ours. This isn't them. This is us. Crowds don't start as mobs, you know. They build. They start with people. People who are afraid. People who feel pressure. People who are stirred on by others because they don't want to stand alone. No one suddenly wakes up one morning wanting to crucify someone. And when it builds, when it becomes the crowd rose louder than our conscience. And not only do we yell, crucify him, we also shout, we have no king but Caesar. It's not just a political statement. That's a confession. Choosing empire over God, safety over truth. Where is it that we do this? Where do we choose comfort, power, safety? Every time we choose what is easy over what is right. Every time we stay quiet because speaking would cost us. Every time we side with power because it feels safe. We're closer to that crowd than we want to admit. The crowd escalates. Pilate wavers and walks away. And in the middle of all the noise, Jesus is silent. He doesn't shout back. He doesn't defend himself. He absorbs it. Because that is what grace looks like here. Not stopping the violence, not overpowering it, but taking it in and refusing to become. And so the question isn't not just what they did. It's when the moment comes, when truth stands in front of us, when the crowd starts to rise, whose voice will we join? Or maybe the question this evening is even closer than that. Not just what they shouted, but what we carry, what we choose, what we have done. That's this week's episode of Peace Lutheran Sermons podcast. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.